Picture this. You are a very renowned film critic. You've won a Pulitzer Prize for criticism, and you've got a successful TV show where you and your friend talk about what's currently in theaters every week, and life is great. Now, as a result of this fame, you are given the chance to write a movie for 20th Century Fox, and you can make any movie you want to make regardless of the rating. So you call up your dear old director friend and say you've got a really special idea for a movie, and go from there. The final product? A movie full of everything a growing boy wants to see. A searing satire of the music industry and the most 60s movie ever made, despite releasing in 1970. You are Roger Ebert, and this is one of your very few film credits beyond the Valley of the Dolls. A film so insane that I don't think I could ever get bored of it, and one that I most assuredly can't play any clips from because this is an NC-17 rated movie for a reason. This is another one of my favorite movies ever made, and I'm excited to tell you this wonderfully schizophrenic tale. From a little history lesson, to a little bit about the story, to the idiot writing this essay's look at why this film matters today and why you should watch it. All that fun stuff. Tune in, drop out, and witness the magic, because this is my happening, and it freaks me out. Russ Meyer is the director of many movies, but most notably are Faster Pussycat, Kill Kill, and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, among other movies that fall under the category of sexploitation. To define the terms, an exploitation film is any film that is utilizing a specific real event, concept, or fad as the core thrust of the film, in a way that's meant to exploit the popularity of that idea, with the two most well-known categories being blaxploitation and sexploitation, which exploit black culture and sex, respectively. Now, technically anything can be an exploitation film, but there's a specific distinction in what makes something an exploitation film, and in the words of that one Supreme Court justice, you know it when you see it. There's a particular tone and style that comes with an exploitation film that sets it apart, and it's that it's generally a lower budget, sleazier, and more violent, and often very independent movie. These are movies that, for better or worse, will push boundaries a normal studio movie wouldn't dare push. Now, to get back to Mr. Meyer, he's an interesting director in this field. Of course, women with large chests was the top priority during casting, and exploiting the audience's interest in women was the motivation, partially because Russ Meyer himself was notoriously open about the fact that he just liked big boobs, and that was a large part of his personal motivation to make movies. But that's not all his movies were. See, Russ likes to infuse his movies with everything a growing boy wants to see, so besides boobs, you can expect violence, cars, chaos, music, drugs, booze, lowbrow comedy, highbrow comedy, and usually a bit of satire that's very sharp and well-pointed. Because that's the thing. While these movies are made for the audience to ogle the women on screen, there's a fair bit going on underneath all the skin, and in a way that I personally find fascinating. But I'm going to hold off on discussing this point any further, because I want to talk about it in relation to this movie specifically. So now we're going to take a little detour to talk about the other big player behind this movie, Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert is someone who needs no introduction if you've studied film before. He is one of the two faces of film criticism, the other being Pauline Kael, not relevant to this story, but I have to mention her contractually. And Ebert is a very interesting guy. Of course, he was known for his reviews, and among a lot of people, he seemed to have a hatred for movies that are particularly violent, like the Friday the 13th movies, or movies that are kinda pointlessly sexual, which is incredibly ironic considering one of his very few film credits is this movie. But part of this has to do with the simple fact that Ebert, for all intents and purposes, was a freak like that. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was just a damn good writer, and I'm a little shocked he didn't do more scripts after this. I mean, Ebert's reviews have been pretty influential to what I make and how I set about making it, and I've even quoted some of his reviews in other things I've written. Most famously, I've quoted his reviews of Human Centipede, Pink Flamingos, and my dearly, dearly beloved Beavis and Butthead Do America, which I bring up to say that he was truly a very talented writer. His blend of thoughtful criticism with jokes made for a more interesting style of review, and one that I personally strive to achieve, and always a style dripping with wit and charm. The thing is, though, being a talented critic doesn't mean you know how to make a movie. However, Ebert was no ordinary critic, which is why he made a movie that was so incredibly smart, fast, and also a little stupid. See, this movie is the most 60s movie ever made, fast-talking chicanery and all, but it's got a lot to say. What that is, we'll discuss in a little bit, but for now, just know that this movie has a lot of stuff going on underneath the glitz and glamour of it all. So, let's go! We start this movie with a weird creative choice. Ignoring the text on screen, we start with something we won't see again until basically the end of the movie. And boy, what a batshit hook it is. We see a big old beach house, a guy dressed as a Nazi, a mostly naked woman about to get murdered, a dude in a regal robe running around with a gun, and boy am I confused when we cut to a three-piece girl rock band singing at some random high school's prom. Don't worry, we'll get back to whatever the hell that was way later. So now we're gonna stick with the band. Here we meet the core 4 main characters of the film, the people who are about to embark on this very psychedelic coming-of-age style journey. We've got Kelly, our main redhead singer, Casey, the guitarist, I think, and Pet, the drummer, I think. Yes, her name is Pet. Technically it's Petronella, and everyone just calls her Pet, but whatever. And, of course, their manager, the last of our core 4, is Harris, the guy. They're performing for a high school prom, if you're willing to accept a room full of very obvious adults as high school. Anyhows, the band gets their $20 or whatever, they go out to their van, smoke a little devil's lettuce, and then we get a montage of the gang talking about how Kelly needs to get to California to get part of an inheritance from her aunt who has connections in the music industry. Kelly and Harris argue a little over a montage, then we're driving off to Cali to the tune of Come With the Gentle People. And God, I love how 60s the music is. If I wouldn't get copy-struck immediately, I'd play some of it here, but alas, that was never an option. Anyway, in California, we meet Kelly's Aunt Susan, who is a fashion designer, I think. Susan is arguing with her assistant, we meet the pervert lawyer Porter, then Susan and Kelly meet, they talk about family, a guy in a cage screams about being in a rage, and then, fuck it, we're off to dinner. We are about 10 minutes into the movie. And let me assure you, I haven't skipped any plot points or any events. This thing is just breakneck. It is the polar opposite of Lost Records' incredibly slow first episode. Anyway, at dinner, Susan offers Kelly a part of the will. Porter says absolutely not, but Susan says she's gonna give her a third of the $1 million inheritance. Kelly is thankful, and then Susan offers to take Kelly and her friends to a party hosted by Ronnie Z-Man Barzell, some hotshot rich music producer. Porter continues to voice his disdain for Kelly. Kelly calls the gang, and then we're off to this swingin' ass party. In the background, you'd notice the band is the Strawberry Alarm Clock, and they're playing Incense and Peppermints, which is the same song that would be used in the club sequence cold open of Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. And in a moment, I'll get to say the line that Austin says that's directly from this movie. Anyways, we, the audience, meet some other eccentric weirdos, like the German bartender, the blonde boxer, the law student, and some porn star lady I don't remember the name of. We get all sorts of 60s dialogue, a whole heaping pile of boobs, and so many freaky ass things that I can't even begin to describe here. Then we get properly introduced to Z-Man, who takes Kelly by the hand to show her the wonders of the music industry, and introduce the other characters I mentioned by name. First, it's Ashley St. Ives, the porn star, a woman I forgot to mention named Roxanne, Lance Rock, the boxer guy I mentioned, and Emerson Thorne, the law student. The party rages, and Z-Man drops one of my favorite lines in the movie, "This is my happening, and it freaks me out," which is what Austin says in that cold open I mentioned earlier. Anyways, Kelly and Z-Man head off to do a house tour, only to go into every room where people are doing stuff, and by stuff, I mean sex! Then Harris, Kat, and Casey show up, introduce themselves, go to the bar, and Harris is looking for Kelly. As he does, Ashley sets her sights on him, and no one else will do. Porter and Casey talk, which means he sexually harasses her. We cut to pool sex, and then Casey meets Roxanne, who has that sapphic look on her eyes, but who cares? Cut to an ass shot, then cut to the party. Ashley explains the plot of her latest porno to some people, and then Ashley tries to get freaky with Harris. They talk, and he says that he's seen one of her films, specifically the one about the, quote, teenage incest triangle, which, what the fuck does that mean? She then goes to stick her tongue in his ear. They get a little freaky, but he shoots her down. He drifts his way around trying to find Kelly. Then we're gonna check in on Pet, who meets Emerson, and they hit it off really quick. Then Harris finds Kelly, Z-Man makes a crazy-ass literary reference, then Z-Man realizes that they gotta have the Kelly Affair, Kelly's band, play. And so the gang gets on stage and they start playing Sweet Talkin' Candyman with the Strawberry Alarm Clock, and it's a lot of fun. The performance is well received, and it lands them a record deal as the Carrie Nations. And then we cut to them playing in the studio, playing In the Long Run, which is my favorite song in the movie, maybe second only to Come With the Gentle People. Anyways, the performance was shot in a weird way that looks so cool, and again, you just have to see it to believe it. Then we transition from the studio into a bar performing live, and god, this editing is so smooth and fun, and the pacing is incredible. Sorry, I'll try to keep the film school shit to a minimum, but I make no promises. The song ends, the bar erupts into cheers, and pretty much every named character we know is heading backstage. Z-Man is talking furiously fast and making so many classic lit references that it still makes my head spin. The girls are then going off to another party, sans Casey. Harris and Kelly talk a smidge in the dressing room about how he's feeling lost and out of place. Kelly then goes to the party without him, and then Lance lays the charm onto Kelly real thick. Harris goes home after everyone else leaves for the party, and it turns out that Ashley didn't leave. She was waiting in the shadows in her car in order to strike and get closer to Harris. They drive off and park where a goodnight kiss quickly turns into some goodnight car sex! And this, my dear longtime viewers, is where that bit spawned. Long before the Sleeping Dogs video or the, at this time, still unreleased Scott Pilgrim video. It was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Anyway, we cut from car sex to Kelly and Lance, who just finished having sex. Then Lance lays it on that he's a gold digger and plants the seeds of doubt that Kelly should be asking for half of the million because Porter is trying to get in on the money. Speaking of, cut to the bastard himself trying to tell Aunt Susan to not give the money. Kelly comes into the office, Porter makes empty threats, and somehow we're 45 minutes into the runtime and it has felt like 20. God, I love this thing. Anyways, let's cut to Pat and Emerson talking law before he makes a reference by saying tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And as we all know, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllables of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Yes, I knew that soliloquy from Macbeth off the top of my head. What about it? Thank you, high school English teachers that made me recite passages of Shakespeare for a grade. Anyway, Shakespearean sleeper agent tangents aside, Emerson and Pet go frolicking in the field and then they go for a roll in the hay. Literally. They have sex in a barn and it's weirdly cinematic and very freaky. Cut to Kelly waking up to a phone call from Porter. She hangs up, he keeps calling, and Lance urges her to take the call. They go to have a drink where she's setting him up to get fired and get her bag. But not until she's had some more sex with Lance. Kelly lets Porter talk his own grave, then she starts dancing, and then Porter whips out his legal document that he made behind Aunt Susan's back, which is all the evidence Kelly needs to prove how incompetent he is. She then takes full advantage of him by taking him back to her place to get a little freaky and teach this bastard how to smoke weed properly, then get freaky to maximize getting him fired as fast as humanly possible. Then we cut to a party celebrating the first record on a major label, and things are gonna get freaky! Ashley takes a very depressed Harris outside, then during a conversation between Pat and Z-Man, some things hit the fan when Aunt Susan's ex-fiancé shows up. He and Aunt Susan head off to talk about how much he still is in love with her, and oh boy, they're gonna get back together. Cut back to the party, and some wannabe Mike Tyson named Randy shows up, and he's Lance's best bud. Lance introduces Pet to Randy, and oh god, these two are gonna do something everyone's gonna regret, aren't they? I ask as though I haven't seen this movie a billion times. Anyways, how's Harris? Well, he and Ashley are on the beach having beach sex! Or trying to, anyway, since Harris is so absolutely zooted that he just doesn't care anymore. Ashley chastises him, says he's a lousy lay, and worst of all, that he's a F-word that YouTube really doesn't like. A super fucked up Harris walks in and he's on that beatdown time. He tries to fight Lance and it goes so poorly for him that Kelly realizes just how far she's fallen. And a badly beaten Harris walks off, Kelly pimp slaps Porter over him vaguely threatening her, and then Susan fires him. Wahoo! Randy really lays the charm on Pet, and oh god, don't tell me she's gonna cuck Emerson. But whatever, who gives one? Z-Man talks to Lance, and they're arguing. Z-Man drops, quote, "It's a shame you've narrowed your field. You'd make such a great switch hitter, sweetheart." And that earns him a punch in the face. Cut back to Harris, and he's got a cab to Casey's place where they drink, pop some downers, and have some questionably consensual sex. And that's questionable on both ends, since they're both equally fucked up on pills, booze, and everything else you can think of at this point. Anyway, cut back to Pet, and oh, she porked Randy. And oh god, Emerson is home and finds them in bed together. Emerson goes outside, Randy leaves, and for some reason, Randy decides to not just drive around Emerson, but actively decides it's hit and run o'clock. And he drives in circles with Emerson on the windshield, then he throws the poor guy off and he drives away. Pet and Emerson talk, they make up, and we cut back to Harris and Casey. They wake up and she's freaking out because they slept together and neither of them remember it due to them both being absolutely not in a state to consent. Harris gets thrown out, he makes a payphone call to Kelly but he hangs up, and now we're off to a vinyl production and studio music montage that ends with Harris throwing a garbage can into a music store window, display of the Carrie Nations' new song in a fit of rage. Then, during an interview, the band goes to play an old classic, Find It. They go to play it, and what's this? Harris is in the rafters and he's looking down. Oh god, Harris, please don't. And he drops so hard he turns into a dummy. Then we see him on the ground with a mouthful of red paint for blood. Then everybody's in the hospital and Kelly is melting down saying everything's her fault. Also, Casey reveals that she's pregos, but the doctor comes out to say Harris is a paraplegic and I know why, but he might be able to recover. And so Casey's comment kinda goes unchecked. Anyway, Casey visits Roxanne, and Roxy immediately goes, "It's abortin' time," because it's that one word YouTube really doesn't like, which opens a very heavy set of philosophical and legal questions about consent when both parties involved are very intoxicated to the point where neither one could give proper consent. But that is an issue for somebody far smarter and more legally knowledgeable than I am to discuss, so I won't. Roxy then tries to peer pressure Casey into an abortion, and oh, we're in the office and ready to go. Casey gets into the office, screams, and then we cut back to Pet and Emerson. They're eating breakfast. They apparently got engaged in the time off screen, and oh god, Randy is back. He's threatening everyone, and through his taunts, the saxophone kicks in, and it's beatdown time! Then, after Pet pulls a knife and Emerson has some red paint blood on his face, Randy leaves, and we cut back to Casey and Roxy doing lesbian things in the park, before cutting back to Kelly and Harris, who are back to living together, and they're working through their problems. And Kelly has learned some things today. Cut to Lance and Z-Man talking about some special kind of party tonight. Then Z-Man calls Roxy saying he's gonna have a freaky little night, and then we show up to the special party where Z-Man is doing a weird, wacky sex roleplay party tonight. And speaking an even more vague, fancy speech that's a lot of fun. We've got Z-Man as Superwoman, Lance as Jungle Lad, and the women as Batman and Robin. Turns out the wine they've been drinking has been laced as shit, and in a montage full of so many weird angle close-ups and colored lights, we set the seeds of chaos as these people start getting real freaky. And during a post-coital conversation between Roxy and Casey that leads to more sex that I'm going to ignore the details of, I'd like to take this time to say that for the astute viewers, these are the costumes we saw people wearing in the start of the movie, with the German bartender being the Nazi-garbed fellow we saw, Z-Man wearing the regal robes, and Roxy being the woman who gets the gun put in her mouth while she's sleeping. Anyways, after the extended Sesbian Lex, we cut back to the fellas, and Lance is being a real dickbag and trying to shut down Z-Man's advances. Also, Z-Man is really fixated on using she/her pronouns, so fuck it, I'll respect that for the rest of the story section. She goes to stroke Lance's shit silly style, and Lance gets really aggressive about it, which pisses off Z-Man so much that she vows to that, quote, "Ere this night does wane, you shall drink the black sperm of my vengeance," which is such an insane line. Anyways, Casey wakes up and gets dressed, but who cares? Z-Man's got Lance tied up and she's gone off the deep end. Lance tries to fight back, but then Z-Man gets a sword and oh my god, she's gone insane. Lance tries to talk his way out of it, but it fails, and she reveals that she's been a woman the whole time. And as Lance insults her, the 20th Century Fox theme flares up as she picks up the sword and decapitates Lance! Holy shit, dude! And now, we get our very first kill on the count, 1 hour and 37 minutes into the movie. Casey hears this, and now we're going back to what happened in the intro with Casey and the German guy trying to flee the insanity of Z-Man. The German runs down to the beach, Z-Man catches up to him as the Flight of the Valkyries kicks into gear, and we've got our second kill in the movie, 1 hour and 39 minutes into the movie, with a brutal stabbing where Z-Man leaves the sword in his chest. She then runs up to the house, grabs a gun, and stumbles across the nude, sleeping Roxy. She walks in, puts the gun in Roxy's mouth, Roxy wakes up, and Z-Man pulls the trigger as she screams and red paint goes flying out of her nose. And god, it's so cool. Also, that would be kill number 3. Anyway, Casey makes a phone call to Kelly and the gang who are playing games. They immediately answer the call, and they furiously make their way over to Z-Man's as she hunts down Casey, and the spy music is in full flight. The gang arrives, but Z-Man shoots Casey in the head, and thus we get kill number 4, 1 hour and 42 minutes into the film. A simple gunshot to the head. Everyone rushes in, and they start rushing Z-Man, except for Harris, who has to get himself out of the car and into his wheelchair. The gang takes the fight outside, they're wrestling for the gun, and Emerson pulls the trigger, and 1 hour, 43 minutes into the movie, Z-Man has died from a gunshot to the chest for kill number 5. The gang cries over the deaths. What's this? Harris is regaining feeling in his legs. And so, we flash forward in time to Kelly and Harris driving out into the fields to frolic, or frolic as much as Harris's crutches allow him to. Then we get a narrator talking about the wonders of human existence and what everybody learned during this film. Z-Man forgot that there's more to life than the highest fantasy level of fantasy. Ashley didn't know love. Lance always took everything and never gave. Porter was a selfish bitch. Susan was too pure for this world. Emerson learned love requires great understanding. Casey and Roxy learned that, I don't know, evil things come from lesbianism. That's what the narrator implied, not me. I'm just the messenger. Harris learned that the past is something to remember, not to live in. Pet learned that you can't act on impulse because that can ruin the best things in your life. Randy was a rat in a cage full of rage or something. And Kelly, her selfishness caused a lot of pain, and she learned to take care of those around her or something. The narrator then basically tells us to be excellent to each other and love on, dudes. After seeing Kelly and Harris walk in the woods for a bit, we cut to the epilogue, where we're getting a triple wedding ceremony. That's right, Susan and Baxter, her former ex-fiancé from earlier, Kelly and Harris, and Pet and Emerson are all getting married in one ceremony for 3 separate weddings. Also, Porter makes a cameo through a window before they shut the blinds and the ceremony starts as the credits roll. What a fucking movie, man. What a movie. Now that you know the plot, let's get into why this is an important film today and why I'm shilling so hard for you to watch it. There's a certain magic to this movie if you're interested in film history, and how it so beautifully and comically captures and satirizes a bygone era in what is now a product of a bygone era. On a technical filmmaking perspective, the sheer relentless pace and camp of the dialogue, the red paint blood, the organized chaos of the party scenes, the overwhelming amount of nudity, the variety of and how much color there is, the franticness of the editing, every aspect of this production is so much fun and is so aggressively 70s. This is one of those rare movies that truly has a bizarre chaos to it, that it's always a treat to watch. But as fun as all of that is, what truly makes this movie so special is the satire of it all. This movie is so clearly and blatantly about the evil force that is the music industry. And this movie predates a lot of other media that talks about that very evil and how it never changed. In 1975, Pink Floyd released their album Wish You Were Here, and on it is a track called Have a Cigar, which talks about how music executives, like Z-Man in this film, don't know anything about the musicians they try to take advantage of. Tom Petty in 2002 released the album The Last DJ, which has the songs The Last DJ and also Money Becomes King, that both talk about how the music industry sucks all the creative energy from a musician and reduces them into what makes money. All of these things can be found in this very film, and we get to see the impact at an individual level. For example, Kelly lets her greed consume her, and so she loses sight of what truly mattered instead of partying and making records. It took something incredibly traumatic for her to snap back to reality and find what really mattered to her. And all of the blame can be placed onto Z-Man and how he constantly supplied drugs and parties in a never-ending hedonistic cycle. Pretty much every other problem can be tied back to being Z-Man's fault or the music industry as a whole. It's a really fascinating thing to see these themes in a movie from 1970, especially because it's so aggressively about the 60s. That's another point I want to touch on, actually. This movie really works and is really so special because the culture it's making fun of is so distinct, and it was so timely in getting made. The movie almost kind of exists as a prototype for the 80s nostalgia revival we've seen an endless amount of in recent years, but done for the 60s immediately after it was over. It's fascinating to see how this movie also summarized the previous era while also setting the tone and standard for what was going to happen going forward in film. The 70s are a very distinct time in film history. It's an era where the independent filmmaker was king, where the true visionary could achieve amazing things. This is the era that gave the world The Muppet Movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Pink Flamingos, Star Wars, Jaws. And what do any of these movies have in common? A key creative force that was a true visionary. Jim Henson, Tobe Hooper, John Waters, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg were all people that cared about what they made, and I chose those examples to show just how varied the decade was in terms of content, but to show just how important a director can be. And this movie is one of the rare instances of the right people working on the right movie at the right time. Roger Ebert and Russ Meyer ended up becoming two of my personal heroes because of this movie, and this movie played no small role in me ending up doing what I do here, which is part of why I think it's so important to watch. I know there's a weird thing that happens when people place a lot of importance onto a film, where you either get people that'll shit on it because they want to be a contrarian, or they fail to see why it possibly could have been important. I would know from personal experience, I genuinely despise Citizen Kane. I think the only redeeming qualities about that dumpster fire are the cinematography and the bird jump scare, but other than that, it has nothing. Yet hundreds of thousands of people will say that it's the greatest movie ever made. And you know what I'd tell them? I'd tell them to go watch this movie and then everything else that comes after, because this is my happening and it freaks me out. There is more that could be said, but honestly, I don't think I want to. I think I would rather you watch the movie and come to your own conclusions for yourself, because it's truly worth it. This is a special movie on every level. For a general audience, this movie is pretty simple, yet it's so frantic, fast-paced, and engaging that you can't help but have fun. And of course, the sheer amount of sex, nudity, and drugs doesn't hurt it either. And for those more interested in filmmaking, the dialogue is so sharp, witty, and specific. The editing is so over the top yet smooth. The colors are so vivid. The red paint blood is my favorite. The way it's shot is so captivating. It's truly a work of art. I genuinely believe this movie deserves far more recognition than it gets, because it's just so wonderful, and there really isn't anything else like it. That said, I'm sure you could guess that I'm giving one of my all-time favorite movies ever made a 10 out of 10, because this is a true masterpiece in every sense of the word. Anyways, my name is A Leg of Glazed Ham, and thank you for watching. It really means a lot. Please leave a like and a comment if you'd like, subscribe if you're nasty. I'd be very grateful if you did. Thanks again, and good night!